Armand never believed that one small moment could change the direction of a life. Kay believed in plans, in effort, in slow progress. Kay believed that life moved step by step, not in sudden turns. At 24, he was still trying to build himself from scratch. He had moved to the city 2 years earlier with a suitcase, a degree, and hope that felt bigger than his bank account. He worked in a small marketing firm where the lights stayed on late and the coffee tasted burnt. His job paid the bills, but it didn't touch his heart. Every morning, he woke up before sunrise, stared at the ceiling of his small rented apartment, and wondered if this was what growing up meant: Trudian pressure and quiet dreams fading into the background. That afternoon, the sky changed without warning. It had been hot and bright all day. By 5 o'clock, thick gray clouds swallowed the sun. Armand stepped out of his office building just as the rain began to fall. At first it was soft, then heavy, then unstoppable. People ran in all directions. Some covered their heads with files, others hid under shop roofs. The street became loud with car horns and splashing water. Armand opened his black umbrella and hurried toward the bus stop across the road. He almost didn't notice her. She was standing at the edge of the shelter, slightly away from the crowd. She didn't look restless like the others. She stood straight, calm, as if the rain belonged to her. Drops touched her hair and rolled down slowly, but she didn't rush to hide. She wore a simple light blue dress and held a brown leather handbag close to her side. There was nothing flashy about her. No loud makeup, no dramatic movement. Yet something about her presence pulled Armand's eyes back again and again. Her name, he would later learn, was Sana. He hesitated for a second before stepping closer. The wind blew hard, pushing rain toward her side of the shelter. Without thinking too much, he moved his umbrella slightly so it covered her as well. "You can stand here," he said, trying to sound natural. She turned to him. Her eyes were deep and steady, the kind that had seen many seasons. She didn't look surprised or uncomfortable. She simply nodded and gave a small smile. "Thank you," she replied. Her voice was low and warm. It carried a calm confidence that felt rare in a world where everyone seemed to rush and shout for a few seconds. They stood in silence, listening to the rain hitting the metal roof above them. Armand felt strangely aware of everything: the smell of wet earth, the sound of buses passing, the closeness between them. He told himself not to stare. She was clearly older, much older. But age did not feel like a wall in that moment. It felt like a detail that didn't matter. The weather changed fast, said, searching for something to keep the moment alive. "It always does," she answered. "Life rarely warns us before it shifts." Her words caught him off guard. Most people would have laughed or complained about traffic. She spoke as if every small thing carried meaning. "You sound like a writer," he said. She smiled again, slightly wider this time. "I teach literature." That explained it. The softness in her tone, the thoughtful pauses, the careful choice of words. They began to talk about simple things: books, favorite authors, the way stories help people survive difficult times. Armand admitted he hadn't read much since college. She didn't judge him. Instead, she recommended a novel and described it in a way that made it sound alive. As she spoke, her hands moved gently in the air and her eyes brightened. It was the first time Armand had seen someone speak about books with such quiet passion. He found himself telling her more than he planned. He told her about his small hometown, about how he was the first in his family to move to a big city. Told her he often felt lost here, even after 2 years. He didn't know why he was sharing these things. He usually kept his thoughts locked inside. But with her, words felt easy. She listened without interrupting. Not once did she check her phone, not once did she look bored. When he finished speaking, she didn't offer advice. She simply said, "It takes courage to leave comfort behind. Don't forget that." No one had ever called him courageous before. A loud bus approached, brakes screeching. The crowd moved quickly. Zana adjusted her bag and stepped forward. "This is mine," she said. He felt an unexpected disappointment. The conversation had lasted maybe 15 minutes, but it felt deeper than many friendships he had built over years. "It was nice talking to you," she added. "Armin?" He blinked in surprise. It told her his name somewhere between sentences without realizing it. The fact that she remembered it so easily made his chest tighten slightly. "It was nice talking to you too," he replied. She stepped onto the bus. Just before the doors closed, she glanced back at him with that same calm expression. Then the bus pulled away, disappearing into the rain. Armin stood there long after his own bus had arrived and left. That night, he lay awake in his apartment, staring at his phone. He didn't have her number. He didn't know where she lived. All he had was a name, Sanan, the memory of rain falling between them. He tried to convince himself it was just a random meeting, but his mind replayed every detail. The way she spoke, the way she listened, the way she had looked at him, not like he was a boy trying to impress her, but like he was a person worth understanding. The next few days felt different. He found himself noticing older couples walking together in parks. He started looking at bookshop windows he usually ignored. He even searched online for the novel she had mentioned and ordered a copy. When it arrived, he read it late into the night, wondering if she would approve of his thoughts about it. A week later, on a quiet Saturday evening, Armand walked into a bookstore near his apartment. He told himself he needed another book, but deep down, he knew he was hoping for something else. He moved slowly between shelves, pretending to read titles. His heart beat faster for no clear reason. Then, near the poetry section, he saw her. She stood with a book open in her hands, her expression focused and peaceful. She wore a simple cream-colored outfit this time, and her hair was tied back neatly. For a second, he thought he was imagining her. But when she looked up in their eyes, recognition flashed across her face. "Armand," she said softly. He smiled before he could stop himself. "I guess the weather isn't needed for us to meet again." She laughed quietly. It was the first time he heard her laugh fully. It wasn't loud. It was gentle, but it carried warmth. "Maybe not," she replied. They began talking again as if no time had passed. He told her he had read the book she recommended. Her eyes lit up with interest. "And?" she asked. "It made me think about patience," he said. "About how some things take time to grow." She studied him carefully, as if measuring his words. "That's true," she said. "Time reveals character." They walked together inside the store, discussing stories and ideas. People around them glanced occasionally, perhaps noticing the age difference. Amon felt it too this time. She had fine lines near her eyes, marks of years lived fully. He had none. But instead of pushing him away, the difference created curiosity. He wondered what experiences had shaped her, what joys and losses she carried quietly. After a while, they moved to a small cafe inside the bookstore. The place was calm, filled with the smell of coffee and paper. They sat across from each other at a wooden table. For the first time, the conversation shifted slightly deeper. "You live alone?" he asked gently. She paused for a brief second. "Yes." There was something unspoken in that pause. "My husband passed away 8 years ago," she added calmly. Armand felt his chest tighten. He hadn't expected that. "I'm sorry," he said. She nodded. "Life doesn't ask what we are ready for." There was no bitterness in her voice, only acceptance. That strength drew him closer, not physically, but emotionally. She had survived something heavy and still carried herself with grace. They talked for hours, about grief, about dreams left unfinished, about the fear of starting over. Armand admitted he sometimes felt scared of failing. Sana told him failure often teaches more than success. Time slipped away unnoticed. When they finally stepped outside, sky was clear. The air smelled fresh after the previous week's rain. They stood facing each other under a streetlight. This city feels less lonely today," Armand said without thinking. She looked at him carefully, perhaps understanding more than he intended. "To say loneliness is lighter when shared," she replied. He wanted to ask for her number. He wanted to suggest meeting again. But hesitation held him back. He didn't know what this connection meant. Friendship. Something else. Was he foolish for even wondering? Before he could speak, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small piece of paper, wrote something quickly and handed it to him. "In case you finish another book." She said it was her number. As she walked away that evening, Armand felt something shift inside him. The world looked the same roads, same lights, same noise, but he felt different. He didn't yet know what this connection would become. All he knew was that meeting her had already begun changing him. And this time, it wasn't the rain that made his heart race. It was her. Armand could hardly believe how quickly his life had changed in the weeks since that first rainy meeting. What had started as a chance encounter had grown into something that both thrilled and unsettled him. Every morning he checked his phone, with a mix of hope and nervousness, wondering if Sana would text or call. He didn't fully understand why he cared so much about her messages, but every word from her seemed to carry weight beyond its meaning. There was a calm in her words that grounded him in ways he hadn't known he needed. He began to notice small patterns in his own life, the way he lingered longer at coffee shops, the way he found excuses to walk past bookstores, the way he felt a strange emptiness when her messages didn't arrive. He knew he was becoming attached, and yet it felt natural, inevitable almost. Like he was being guided by some invisible thread connecting him to her. Their second meeting had been unexpected, yet it felt almost destined. Armand had wandered into the bookstore that weekend, partly for distraction, partly because he hoped to see her again. He told himself it was coincidence, but deep down, he knew he had been waiting for it. When he spotted her near the poetry section, standing with a book in her hands and her hair neatly tied back, he felt a rush of recognition and relief. She looked up and their eyes met, and suddenly the world around them disappeared. She smiled softly, and he realized that her presence alone could make his pulse quicken and his mind quiet at the same time. It was confusing, exhilarating, and their greetings were simple, almost casual, but the weight behind them was unmistakable. "Armand," she said, and it felt like both an acknowledgement of the past and an invitation to something new. "I guess the weather isn't needed for us to meet again," he joked, trying to mask his nervousness. She laughed quietly, a warm, gentle sound that seemed to echo inside him. And it was as if the universe had quietly shifted to allow this moment. From that day, their meetings became more frequent, though they remained carefully casual. Coffee shops, bookstores, short walks through quiet streets. They never rushed, never pushed boundaries, but the tension between them was undeniable. Conversations flowed easily, sometimes meandering from books and films to deeper topics like loneliness, fear, and dreams. Sana shared pieces of her past, carefully chosen without dramatizing her pain. Armand listened, captivated by her wisdom, her calm, her honesty. She spoke about grief and resilience with a lightness that belied the heaviness of her experiences. Her voice carried both strength and tenderness, and Armand felt himself opening up to her in ways he never had with anyone else. He shared his insecurities, his fear of mediocrity, his struggles with identity and ambition. Each word seemed to draw them closer, building an invisible bridge of trust and understanding. He realized that their connection wasn't just about attraction, it was about recognitions to people seeing each other fully and without pretense. But with every moment of closeness came a quiet fear. Armand knew the world would judge. Friends had already commented. Some had outright disapproved. "She's old enough to be your mother," one friend had said. And though Armand laughed it off at the time, the words gnawed at him. He began to notice the age gap more acutely, the way her experiences were different from his, the way she carried herself with a measured grace that he didn't yet understand. Yet instead of pushing him away, these differences fascinated him. He wanted to understand her life, her choices, the moments that had shaped her. With Sana, learning felt like discovery rather than effort, and that made him feel alive. He found himself craving her presence not just for comfort or companionship, but for insight, for the sense that he was learning to see the world in a deeper, more meaningful way. Sana, however, remained careful. She had lived long enough to understand the fragility of connection, the ways in which attachment could hurt. She noticed Armin's growing affection, and while a part of her felt drawn to him, she had lost someone once, someone irreplaceable, and the memory lingered in quiet corners of her mind. She wasn't naive about age differences, social expectations, or the complications that might arise from a bond like theirs. One evening, as they sat across from each other at a small cafe bathed in golden light, she spoke carefully, her words measured but sincere. "You deserve someone your age," she said softly. And the simple statement carried layers of care, protection, and unspoken worry. Armin felt a pang of frustration, not at her, but at the circumstances, and immediately realized he had spoken truths that neither of them could ignore that night. As they walked in opposite directions under the quiet streetlights, silence hung heavily between them. There were no dramatic gestures, no tearful confessions, just the weight of unspoken feelings. Each step felt longer than it should, as though the city itself was stretching the distance between them. Armand replayed every word in his mind, analyzing her tone, her expression, the subtleties of her gestures. He realized that attraction alone couldn't define what he felt. It was respect, admiration, longing, and a quiet desire to connect at a level deeper than surface feelings. For Sana, it was the same. She felt the magnetic pull, the curiosity, the warmth, yet she also felt caution and responsibility. She knew that even a gentle misstep could unravel what they had so carefully built. Both understood the complexity of their situation. Armin noticed how she remembered tiny details, how her questions reflected thoughtfulness and attentiveness. He found himself analyzing his own feelings, realizing that this connection had brought new awareness to his emotions. He reflected on his past relationships, his friendships, and the loneliness he had often disguised as independence. With Sana, nothing was disguised. Everything felt transparent, honest, and alive. He felt himself growing, maturing in ways he had never anticipated. The age difference became less a barrier and more a lens through which he could appreciate life's complexity. He saw patience, resilience, and subtle strength in her, qualities that drew him closer, emotionally, than any physical attraction ever could. Sana also began to recognize the impact he had on her life. In his presence, she felt energy and curiosity she hadn't felt in years. His youthful perspective, his willingness to question and explore, reminded her of possibilities she had long dismissed. Yet she remained guarded. She understood that feelings could be intoxicating, that attachment could cloud judgment, and that both of them needed clarity before taking any step forward. She valued their bond, their conversations, the emotional honesty they shared. But she refused to let fear or social expectation dictate the course. She watched him, studied him, and allowed herself small moments of vulnerability without fully surrendering. She understood that the risk of deep emotional entanglement was high, but the potential for genuine human connection was higher. The tension between desire and caution defined their interactions. Every smile, every touch of a hand, every lingering gaze carried unspoken meaning. Armand began to notice subtle signals, how her voice softened when she laughed, how her eyes lit up when discussing a book, how she paused thoughtfully when asked personal questions. Each observation deepened his understanding of her as a person, not just as a source of affection. He learned to appreciate the layers, the past experiences that shaped her, the quiet wisdom embedded in her demeanor. Likewise, Sana noticed his attentiveness, his eagerness to understand, his willingness to share vulnerabilities. She saw that his attraction was not superficial, that he valued emotional depth and connection above all else. This recognition both comforted and unsettled her, for she knew that genuine attachment carried potential for both joy and pain. One afternoon, they visited a quiet park, walking side by side along a path lined with tall trees. The sunlight filtered through leaves, casting shifting patterns on the ground. They talked about life, regret, dreams deferred, and the weight of expectations. Armin admitted he often felt invisible in a city bustling with ambition and competition. Sana nodded, acknowledging his honesty. She shared stories of her own challenges, moments when life had tested her patience and resolve. The conversation was intimate without being intrusive, honest without being overwhelming. Each step along the path seemed to cement a silent understanding. Between them, a recognition that they were walking parallel journeys now intersecting in ways neither fully understood.